Imagine this. You walk into a party. Someone you barely know walks up to you, smiles and says, "So, how's the weather been?" And something inside you, something deep, primal, almost allergic, just dies a little. You nod. You smile back. You say, "Oh, yeah, crazy weather lately." But inside? Inside you are screaming. Not because you're rude, not because you're antisocial, not because you secretly hate this person, but because something in your brain is wired to find that conversation, that hollow, surface-level exchange, genuinely painful to sit through. If that sounds like you, stay with me. Because today we're going deep. We're going past the surface, which, honestly, is exactly where you like to be anyway. Here's the thing most people get wrong about small talk haters. The assumption is always the same. Oh, they're just shy. Or worse, they think they're too good for normal conversation. But that couldn't be further from the truth. People who hate small talk aren't conversation avoiders. They're not antisocial hermits hiding in the corner nursing a drink, desperately wishing everyone would leave. In fact, many of them are some of the most intensely engaged, deeply curious, genuinely interested conversationalists you will ever meet. They just need the conversation to mean something first. And that distinction? That's everything. Psychologists have a name for this. It's called the need for cognitive depth, and it's deeply connected to a personality trait called openness to experience, one of the big 5 personality traits studied in psychology for decades. People who score high in openness aren't just open to new ideas intellectually. Their brains literally crave stimulation, complexity, and meaning. Small talk, by design, offers none of that. It's the conversational equivalent of eating a rice cake when your brain wants a 5-course meal. Let me paint you a picture of what's actually happening neurologically when a high-openness person is forced into small talk. The brain has a network called the default mode network, your DMN, which activates when you're daydreaming, self-reflecting, imagining, and doing deep thinking. For people who naturally operate in this mode, it's where they feel most alive. It's their home turf. Now, small talk doesn't engage the DMN. It's too formulaic, too predictable, too scripted. So while one person is perfectly comfortable exchanging pleasantries about the weekend, another person's brain is literally bored at a neurological level, firing fewer reward signals, generating less dopamine, and producing more of what researchers call cognitive friction. Their brain isn't resisting small talk out of stubbornness. It's resisting it the same way your body resists bad food. It's a signal. It's feedback. And most people who hate small talk have spent their whole lives being told that feedback is a flaw. It isn't. But let's talk about where it comes from. A lot of people who find small talk deeply unsatisfying grew up in environments where conversations were real. Maybe they had a parent who talked to them like a person from an early age, who asked them what they actually thought, what they actually felt, who engaged with their ideas seriously. Or maybe it was the opposite. They grew up in an emotionally muted household where nothing real was ever said out loud, and they developed a deep, almost desperate hunger for genuine connection as a result. Either way, something shaped them to understand that words are powerful, that conversation is currency. And spending that currency on, "So, did you catch the game last night?" feels like leaving it on the sidewalk. There's also a fascinating social anxiety angle here that doesn't get talked about enough. Most people assume social anxiety makes someone bad at all social interaction. But researchers like Dr. Bernardo Carducci, who spent decades studying shyness and social anxiety, found something surprising. Many socially anxious people aren't afraid of people. They're afraid of shallow people. More precisely, they're afraid of being misunderstood, of performing a version of themselves that isn't real, of skating across the surface of a moment and never being truly seen. And small talk, almost by definition, is a performance. It's a social ritual. It has rules, scripts, and expected responses. For someone who craves authenticity, that performance feels exhausting at best and suffocating at worst. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. A 2010 study from the University of Arizona, led by psychologist Matthias Mell, followed 79 participants for 4 days, recording snippets of their real-life conversations. The findings were striking. People who engaged in more substantive conversations, the kind involving ideas, beliefs, personal experiences, reported significantly higher levels of well-being and life satisfaction. Not just slightly higher, significantly. Meanwhile, the more small talk someone engaged in, the lower their reported sense of meaning and connection. Think about that for a second. The conversations we've been told are socially essential, the lubricant of civilization, the glue of community, were actually making people feel emptier. And the conversations we're told to save for close friends only were the ones filling people up. If you've always hated small talk, that study might feel like someone just handed you a permission slip you didn't know you needed. But let's be honest about something, because this script wouldn't be doing you any favors if it wasn't. Hating small talk isn't always just about depth-seeking or authenticity. Sometimes, and this is the part that takes a little courage to look at, it's about control. Deep conversations have a direction, a purpose, a destination. You can prepare for them, guide them, contribute meaningfully to them. Small talk is structureless. It meanders. It requires you to be comfortable with impermanence, with filler, with the beautiful nothingness of just existing next to another human, without needing to extract something profound from the moment. And for some people, that is deeply uncomfortable. Not because they're deep, but because they're anxious. Because small talk leaves them feeling exposed without armor. Because they haven't learned yet that not every conversation needs to be a masterpiece to be worthwhile. That's worth sitting with. Because sometimes the avoidance of small talk is wisdom, and sometimes it's armor. And knowing the difference, that's the real psychological work. There's also a cultural layer here we'd be wrong to ignore. In many Western cultures, particularly in the United States, small talk is practically a civic duty. Silence is uncomfortable. Pauses must be filled. Strangers must be greeted warmly, briefly, and efficiently. But travel to countries like Finland, Japan, or parts of Scandinavia, and you'll find cultures where silence between people is not awkward, it's respectful. Where a quiet moment isn't a social failure, but a form of intimacy. Where you don't ask someone how they're doing unless you actually want to know. People raised in those cultural contexts, or people who've absorbed those values, often find the Western obsession with small talk genuinely baffling. They're not broken. They're just operating from a different set of rules about what connection looks like. And maybe that's the reframe we all need. Maybe the people who hate small talk aren't failing at conversation. Maybe they're holding out for a different kind. So what do you actually do with all of this? If you're someone who dreads the elevator ride with a coworker, who feels your soul slowly leaving your body at networking events, who has turned down social invitations simply because you couldn't face another hour of, so what do you do? What's the move? First, recognize that your preference is legitimate. You're not broken, you're not arrogant, and you're not failing at being human. You are simply someone whose brain is calibrated for depth. That's a feature, not a flaw. Second, understand that small talk, at its best, is a threshold. It's the doorway, not the room. The people who are good at small talk aren't staying in the doorway forever. They're using it to get through to something real. So instead of resisting it entirely, try reframing it as a brief ritual you move through on the way to where you actually want to go. Ask one slightly more interesting question. Take one slightly deeper turn. Lead the way. And third, find your people. Because they exist. There are whole rooms full of people who light up when you skip the script and go straight to, what's something you've been thinking about lately that you haven't been able to stop thinking about? There are people who will look at you like you just handed them water in a desert when you ask them something real. You are not alone in this. You never were. So here's where I want to leave you today. The psychology of people who hate small talk isn't really a psychology of avoidance. It's a psychology of longing. A longing to be known, to be seen, to exchange something real in a world that often settles for surface. And that longing? It's one of the most human things there is. The psych spot exists for exactly this kind of conversation, the kind that actually means something. So if today's video felt like someone finally put words to something you felt your whole life, drop a comment below. Tell me the last conversation that actually made you feel alive. And if you want more of this, more psychology that actually lands, more insights that feel like coming home, hit subscribe, because we're just getting started.